Hi, Year 12. I hope you had a productive lesson yesterday and that you've come to a better understanding of the human experiences in Past the Shallows based on Fable Parrot's context. Just a reminder that you need to keep on top of your classwork. If you didn't complete any of the activities from last lesson, you need to do so as soon as possible. And also your homework for next week is to complete the assessing supplementary text analysis sheet. I'll be back on Friday, so if you want to come into English Help at lunchtime on Friday, I'm happy to give you a hand with that, but see how you go otherwise. So 2 things that we're going to do today. The first half of the lesson, I'm going to run you through section 1 of paper 1 of the HSC and some of the questions that we're going to get. We've already looked at a couple of these and I've modelled some for you. So we're going to continue to do that. And we're going to try and do that sort of 1 or 2 a week, just so that we keep up those skills as well as or alongside looking at Past the Shallows. So that's the first part of the lesson. And the second half of the lesson, I'm going to allow you some time to research some supplementary texts. Now, as I go through this, I suggest that you take notes. I'm going to give you access to this video on our Google Classroom at the end of the week. However, I find the best way to really retain information is to write it down. So, paper 1 involves 2 sections. Section 1 is a short answer reading comprehension style section where you get a series of unseen texts, so you're not going to be able to see them beforehand, you won't know what they are, with questions of varying marks, worth of marks. The second section is an essay in relation to text and human experiences. So this section is common to all of the English courses, okay, so you need to keep that in mind. It will test 2 things: your knowledge of the rubric and your ability to analyse texts. So if one of those areas is a weakness for you now, you need to do something about it. So if you don't know the rubric or you don't understand parts of it, go back through the annotations that we did and the work that we did on the rubric and get that really clear in your mind. If you're not that great at finding techniques and analysing texts, there are plenty of texts that I can give you that where you can practice finding those techniques. And we're going to do some of that today as well. All right, some exam strategies for this section. We're going to do this now. I'm going to get you to do this now, but we'll revisit it obviously closer to the exams and your trials. But some strategies that you need to put in place today. I suggest that you read the questions first and then the stimulus. So you will have 2 physical booklets in the exam, a question booklet and a stimulus booklet. You get 10 minutes reading time for this paper, and in that time you're not allowed to pick up a pen. So what I suggest that you do is that you read the first question and then you read the stimulus in relation to that question. And I think it's obvious that if you read the question, you know what you're going to look for in the stimulus. Okay, so do that. Second, don't get too weighed down with the details of the text. Often students freak out in the exam and they read a text and realise that they haven't actually read it and that their eyes are just skimming over the words or whatever. You need to read this critically, okay? You need to be switched on the first time because you don't have time to go back and reread it. Switch on the first time, read it with a critical eye and get a general gist of what the text is about and how it represents aspects of the human experience. Now, a really common issue with your essays last term was time management. Now, time management is vital in this section. It's a section where you can do really, really well because they are only short answer questions. So it's a section where you can just grab marks and kind of move on. So you have 45 minutes for this section, and the section is worth 20 marks. That means that you have roughly 2.5 minutes per mark. Now, you need to be aware of the time. If you have a 2-mark question, that means that you spend no longer than 5 minutes on that particular question. Okay, you need to be really conscious of that. You need to make sure that you're not writing too much or too less for the marks allocated. So you need to be really conscious of time and really conscious of the marks allocated to each question. You need to have your rubric in front of you now. If you do not have your rubric in front of you, could you please do so now? Now, you have a couple of copies of the rubric. You have it broken down in that, I don't know, 6 or 7 or 8 page booklet that I gave you for homework last week. You also have it in table format, and you also have the 1-page rubric that I gave you on Monday's lesson, okay? So you've got a couple of options there. You need to have that in front of you. Remember, this section is testing you on your knowledge of the rubric, so you must have that in front of you, and you must refer to it in your responses. All right, let's get started. How does the poem convey what is valued by the persona? That is your question. So remember, you need to read the question first. How does the poem convey what is valued by the persona? Think too about what the question is asking you in relation to human experiences. It's asking us what we value as a particular human experience and how that is represented in this particular poem. So what aspect of human experience in relation to values is conveyed in this particular poem, okay? Remember, we need to read it critically. Take some time now to center yourself. As I read this poem, I want for you to get the general gist of what this poem is about. So let's read it. Where am I? I am desperate for connection. I must have hit a black spot. The sun is glaring at me and blinding my display screen. All I can see is my own face. Coarse sand has crept between my toes. I have wandered too far. I need to Google a map, text someone who will reconnect me. This shell, this sand, the smell of rotting kelp. I poke at the dead things with pieces of driftwood. This strange salty wind, seagulls, and what lookout. How can a message washed up in an old bottle compare to my new slate black iPhone? Now, I could tell you what this is about, or at least my interpretation of it, but you wouldn't learn anything then. So could you spend some time now? I'll get the teacher to pause the video for a minute or two, turn to the person next to you and talk to them about what you think this poem is about. Okay, this is the marking criteria. You will not get this on the actual exam paper, okay? So this is what Nessa has given us so that we know what you get marks for. As you can see, it's not very detailed. So to get 3 marks, you need to demonstrate an understanding of how the poem conveys what is valued by the persona. To get 2 marks, you demonstrate some understanding of how the poem conveys what is valued by the persona, and for 1 mark, provides some relevant information. Now, remember, this is worth 3 marks, so you need to spend roughly 2.5 minutes per mark. So that brings us up to 7.5 minutes. Is that right? Yeah, 7.5 minutes. So you need to spend 7.5 minutes on this. Given that it is a 3-mark question, I would be aiming for 3 techniques included in your response, okay? So for each mark, I would have a technique. This is a really, not foolproof, but it's a sensible way to make sure that you've covered all your bases and that you've answered the question thoroughly. So 7.5 minutes, 3 techniques. The first thing that you need to do, and you can do this as soon as you pick up a pen, is you need to identify some techniques in the poem, okay? What I would like for you to do is now go and try and find some techniques in that. I'm happy for you to work on this as a pair, but you need to identify some techniques now. I'll get the teacher to pause the video now.